All right, so now that we've covered the abstract or summary, let's take a look at the next section of the paper, and that's the paper introduction. And a lot of this is going to be on just the mainstream narratives of virology in general. So let's go over the paper's introduction. So emerging and reemerging pathogens are global challenges for public health. And coronaviruses are enveloped RNA viruses that are distributed broadly among humans, other mammals, and birds that cause respiratory, enteric, hepatic, and neurological diseases. Yes, that's a big claim there. But again, these are all just assumed in this paper. So a pathogen is a microorganism or agent that can supposedly produce disease. And a viral envelope, for this coronavirus has an envelope, is the outermost layer of many types of viruses and helps to protect the genetic material when traveling between host cells. And respiratory diseases affect the breathing organs, and enteric diseases affect the intestines or gut. And hepatic diseases affect the liver, which is responsible for detoxification, metabolism, and storage of nutrients. And neurological diseases affect the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, which extend from the brain and spinal cord to the rest of the body. And detoxification here, it's both of these because I'm going to expand on these. Detoxification is the removal of toxic substances from the body, and metabolism is all the chemical processes that occur to maintain life, such as those involved in converting food into energy, building and repairing cells, and elimination of metabolic waste. And a nerve is a cable-like bundle of fibers, or fiber that transmit electrical impulses. And pretty much, controls the body and so on, or sends signals to cause it to move. All right, let's continue further in the paper. So, 6 coronavirus species are known to cause human disease, and 4 of these viruses, 229E, OC43, NL63, and HKU1, are prevalent and typically cause common cold symptoms in immunocompetent individuals. In other words, these are just healthy individuals. You get these common cold symptoms. And let's go background on this common cold and so on. So first off, immunocompetence is the ability to have a normal, quote, immune response following exposure to an antigen. And antigens are, or I'll just fix the grammar. An antigen is any molecule or foreign matter that can bind to a specific antibody and can trigger an, quote, immune response. And antibodies are proteins that identify and neutralize, or, quote, identify and neutralize foreign objects such as pathogenic bacteria and, quote, viruses. And an immune response is the body's complex and coordinated response to, quote, invading pathogens or foreign substances that may harm the body. And this common cold, so the common cold is a, quote, viral infectious disease of the upper respiratory tract that mainly affects the respiratory mucosa, basically another word for respiratory epithelium, of the nose, throat, and sinuses and larynx. And symptoms of the common cold include coughing, sore throat, runny nose, sneezing, headache, and fever. And fever is defined as having a body temperature above normal range, and it's typically between 37.2 and 38.3 degrees Celsius, or 99 and 100.9 degrees Fahrenheit in humans. And the upper respiratory tract, this part right here. Yeah, this upper respiratory tract, this part right here. So common cold is viral infectious disease of this upper respiratory tract. And the upper respiratory tract is a region involved in the initial pathway for air to enter the body. And the larynx or voice box is in the top of the neck, involved in breathing, producing sound, and protecting the trachea from food getting inside. And the sinuses are air-filled cavities in the skull connected to the nasal cavity with possible functions in moistening / filtering air and providing resonance in speech. And here's just the image of this upper respiratory tract. There's a nasal cavity there. There's a pharynx right there. Then there's the larynx right there, the voice box. And the pharynx is over here. And yeah, this is just behind the mouth over there, and there's the larynx, the voice box, and so on. And there's the lower respiratory tract. There's a trachea, it goes all the way down here, or the windpipe. And there is the the lungs and so on. There's the bronchi that branches out. All right, now let's continue further in the paper. So the two other strains. So number here the paper states that there were 6 coronavirus species known to cause human disease. 4 just for the common cold. And now there's 2 other strains: severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, SARS-CoV, and Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus, MERS-CoV, are zoonotic in origin and have been linked to sometimes. So 2 disqualifiers are linked to sometimes fatal illness. SARS-CoV, now SARS-CoV-1, because the new one is the COVID one, is a, quote, strain or variant of a coronavirus that causes, quote, severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS. And the word acute in here refers to the sudden onset and rapid progression of symptoms. And syndrome refers to a collection of symptoms associated with a disease or disorder. And a zoonotic disease is an quote infectious disease caused by a pathogen that, quote, jumps from a non-human to a human and vice versa, or non-human animal. I think that's probably more applicable, and vice versa. Yeah, so interesting there. So this one here, these ones supposedly jumped from an animal to humans and so on. So continuing further in the paper, SARS-CoV was the causal agent, or the SARS-CoV-1 was a causal agent of the severe acute respiratory syndrome outbreaks in 2002 and 2003 in Guangdong Province, China. And MERS-CoV was the pathogen responsible for severe respiratory disease outbreaks in 2012 in the Middle East. And given the high prevalence and wide distribution of coronaviruses, the large genetic diversity and frequent recombination of their genomes, and increasing human-to-animal interface activities, or human-animal interface activities, novel or new coronaviruses are likely to emerge periodically in humans owing to frequent cross-species infections and occasional spillover events. So yes, that's the introduction, part of the introduction of the paper. And again, just a lot of mainstream assumptions that this paper just assumes. All right, so genetic recombination is the exchange of genetic material between different organisms, resulting in the production of offspring with combinations of traits different from those found in either parent. And one example is just sexual reproduction in humans, for example, where the offspring may get traits that are different from both parents. For example, if both are short, and then one could be tall, and that could be just due to genetic mix-up and so on, just shuffling and exchange. All right, so continue further. So, quote, viruses recombine genomes whenever 2+ quote viral genomes are present in the same host cell. And I haven't actually gone over the mainstream definition of viruses, but I'll go over it right here. So a quote virus is an infectious or quote infectious particle too small to be seen by an optical light microscope, and can only replicate inside the living cells of an organism. And yes, some of them are said to be cause disease or health issues or death in humans and so on. So going further, so spillover events right here. So occasional spillover. Spillover events occurs when a population with a high pathogen prevalence, termed a reservoir population, or occurrence. Actually, I'll delete this occurrence. Basically saying the word occurrence. So with a high pathogen prevalence or occurrence, and this is termed a reservoir population, comes into contact with a new host population, and the pathogen may or may not be transmitted within the new host. And going further, so climate change is said to increase the risk of viral spillover. Yes, if you go in the Wikipedia article on this, saying climate change is going to increase this this basically pathogen swapping into new host and so on. And they may or may not be transmitted within it, but assuming there's going to be another pandemic declared, saying that climate change caused another quote pandemic. Anyways, Continuing further in the paper, in late December 2019, several local health facilities reported clusters of patients with pneumonia of unknown cause that were epidemiologically. All right, I'll try that again. So that were epidemiologically linked to a seafood and wet animal wholesale market in Wuhan, Hubei province in China. And on December 31st, 2019, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or China CDC, dispatched a rapid response team to accompany Hubei province and Wuhan city health authorities and to conduct an epidemiologic and etiologic, basically looking for the cause of disease, investigation. And this paper right here is the report of those findings. So we report the results of this investigation, identifying the source of the pneumonia clusters, and describe a novel coronavirus detected in patients with pneumonia whose specimens were tested by the China CDC at an early stage of the outbreak. And we also describe clinical features of the pneumonia in 2 of these patients. All right. Epidemiology is the study of the distribution patterns, risk factors, and disease conditions in a population. And a wet animal wholesale market is a market that sells live animals or animals butchered when sold. And wholesale refers to selling in bulk and typically to other businesses. And clinical features right here is just observable or measurable. Clinical features are observable or measurable characteristics associated with a disease or patient. Or patients such as symptoms and laboratory findings. All right, that's very interesting. So now let's take a look at the summary of the introduction. So let's go over a summary of the paper's introduction. So supposedly there are, quote, global challenges of, quote, disease-causing microbes or microorganisms. And coronaviruses have an outer layer protecting RNA inside. And coronaviruses supposedly cause diseases relating to breathing, the gut, liver, brain, and nervous system. And 6 known coronaviruses are quote, or is it double known? So 6 coronaviruses are, quote, known to cause human disease. 4, quote, viruses cause the common cold. And 2 other, quote, strains have been linked to fatal illness. And this is the SARS-CoV or CoV1 caused outbreaks in 2002 and 2003 in China. And the MERS-CoV, quote, caused outbreaks in 2012 in the Middle East. And new or novel coronaviruses are, quote, likely to emerge in humans because coronaviruses are widespread, genetically diverse, and interactions between humans and animals are increasing. And on December 29, 2019, clusters of patients with inflammation of the lungs, aka pneumonia of, quote, unknown cause, were, quote, linked. Again, a lot of these words here, quotations that I put just that were questionable, like what do you mean by linked and so on. Linked to an animal market in Wuhan, China. On December 31st, 2019, the China CDC sent a rapid response team to Wuhan to investigate. And this paper reports the results of the investigation, so identifies the source of the pneumonia clusters, claims to detect a, quote, novel coronavirus in the pneumonia patients that were tested at an early stage of the outbreak. Again, it's all quotations, early stage of the outbreak. Clinical features, aka symptoms and laboratory results, are presented for 2 of the pneumonia patients.